Okay, in March, I got back up to Canada. I was back up in Canada. I started a diggers group, which was a group that would get scramble for food and clothes, and let anybody who didn't have anything could have them and that. So I started a group in Vancouver and then in Calgary. Then it was March, it was still winter, but I decided I was going to go home and get back to Montreal. So I hitched east. I just had a small jacket, but I had a little cat, a little kitten I found. And I hitchhiked across the whole country carrying this little kitten in my jacket as my companies across it. These are my funny, stupid little memories. But there's the Leo cat again, going across the prairies. I had the money, so it's just you hitchhike and you get by. So then in May I got to I got to Toronto. No, in March, probably April, I got to Toronto, or May. And anyways, I stayed at this one lady's house, Brenda, and she later became my first wife. But that's the first time I met her at York when I stayed at her place. Then I left. I went. June, I was home in Montreal, and I was working. I was just on St. Antoine Street. Really wasn't doing much. I was just hanging out and the coffee shops and that. And then I was seeing one girl, but then Brenda shows up from Toronto and moves in and just kind of established herself. And she stayed for about a month or so. Then it ended, and then I ended up working July, August at Expo 67 and at the World's Fair. So this was this whole, I don't know if call it Leo. It's a Leo face. I did have the long hair. I was living a very dramatic life. I met people and they were good and bad. To me, that provides it. But the Sag Pentan theme I see really distinctly. But this was really distinct from the Cancer. I'm on my own. I'm doing my thing. I'm living my way, and look what I'm running into. You know, like. But I didn't really have any skills or anything that people would notice me. But it was deeply formulating my thinking and my processes as I was learning through this time. Back in these days, these were psychedelic times, and so psychedelic experiences were mixed in with these adventures. Okay, by September, my progressed moon, you gotta bear with me, I'm just going through this, it's just a story, but I'm trying to give you pieces of it. It's, probably should call it True Confessions. It's, life changes, things go by, you go down the river and it changes fast. But here's the Scorpio Sag has gone into a Virgo theme. Last year, critical. So in September, I started, I started really chanting a little bit more, and I was hanging out at that time, Prabhupada, who I'd met, they'd started building little centers or little temples around the world, and there was one in Montreal that had started. It was a bowling alley, but they turned it into a temple, and I would go there chanting. And I was hanging out there for a month or two, and he'd written his first 3 books on the Srimad Bhagavatam, a mystical book. It's a 20-volume series. He translated them to English, but he had just done the first 3 volumes, and they came from India, and they got there when I was there, and the guy who was there gave me the 3 of them. I still have them to this day. I didn't read them for 10 years, but I've read them through twice now and gone through the whole 20-volume set as a very prime factor of understanding things. Now, he was the Virgo, swinging back to Vedanta, but anyways, I was template, so that was like cleaner than, wasn't like smoking up or doing other things. I was cleaning up my act, you might say. But I felt I was working at the World's Fair and cleaning up my, then I felt I got to get out of here. I got to go. I was driven to feel I had to get to India, or really I was trying to get to England first. So I got the last, I couldn't afford a commercial thing, so I found there's freighters that you could rent a room on and go across. So I found the last freighter leaving for Montreal for England before it froze and they closed it off. And I took that over to England, and so then I left Canada. So this was with the in the Virgo, but still the Sagittarius thing, looking at other teachings, other philosophies, all these things were coming in, and I'm searching for them. And I had this knowledge of having to go further. So I got to London. I'm living in London, got a little apartment, a room and a place. Finchley off the Finchley Road tube stop, but it's like, I'm living alone. I finally found a job delivering handbills. So I was delivering handbills all over London. So I saw London not like a tourist. I saw London handbills, apartments, rooms, over this fence, that fence, walking around that. But I couldn't make enough money. I could pay the rent, but not enough money to live or anything in London. Like I felt, oh my goodness, I had about $200 left. And from what I started with, I thought, I don't want to get stuck in a country I can't make enough money. I don't want to get stuck on an island I can't afford to get off of. That's what I was feeling at the time. It's kind of funny looking back. But so I went and I bought a ticket. I left London. I took a boat over to Belgium. Then I went hitchhiked from Belgium over to France. Then from France across France to Germany, down to Italy, from Italy into Yugoslavia, to Bulgaria, to Turkey. So I got to Istanbul in a few weeks. I had no money, so I was just sleeping. I was sleeping and traveling at the same time, so that I wouldn't have to. The traveling provided the sleeping, and I would just grab a piece of cheese or some little bit of things in the market where things stopped. But that wasn't a big deal. But I got to Istanbul. It was funny because I was there for Christmas, and I thought I'd call home to my mom just to say hi. Okay, so I had to wait. You had to wait for the lines to collect, for the lines to be put through back then, and I waited 6 hours for a connection. There were so many people trying to call it New Year at Christmas Day. It was 6 hours wait. I hadn't eaten. I still that whole 6 hours waiting to get the call home. I had to wait by the phone in this booth or area. So finally, I get the connection. I call her. And it was collect charges, so she took it, but she was so worried about the charges, so saying hello, say hello to everyone, goodbye, and she hung up in about a minute because she didn't want to pay the charges on a phone call. And we never talked, how are you, what's happening, nothing. It was just, so I was kind of insulted by that when she ended the call. This is still the sun within the realm of my Mercury, it's just still, and the Pluto is still moving off it, but I realized I'm not going back like that. I was mad. So then that was the point where I decided I've got to get to India. I've got to go to India and go further. I was thinking about that anyways when I left England, but then I just knew there's no way going. So I went further, and one more last Pluto episode. I was in Istanbul. I didn't have enough money for the fare across Istanbul, so I bought a student ticket. It was $20. I had 30. An adult fare was 36. So I couldn't have got across. So I bought a $20 ticket. I got in. I had a beard, a little bit more long hair than that, but I had a beard, and I just got on the bus. I'm 3/4 away across Turkey, almost at Ankara, when the guy comes to get the ticket. So I give him the ticket, and he looks at the ticket and looks at my passport. It says no studente. I hand him back the passport. I just hand him back. I'm faking it. I hand him back the passport. I say studente. I give it back to him. He looks through again. He can't find studente. He said, "It's not. I was a student, but I'm not a student. Like I left." But so we just went back and forth. Finally, he walks away. He comes back with 2 guards, Turkish guards. They have guns. They have them pointed at my head. He says, "No studente." I take the passport. I flash in my head. I say, "Studente." The guards chose to believe me, and maybe he backed off. They let me go, and I got through. So I feel it was like an angel watching over to get me across there. So I get to the border, Turkey, and then I got a bus going up through Iran and going around through Turkey. There's lots of different adventures, no sense talking about them all, but I got to the border of India in January 14th, 1968. Okay, still in this Virgo phase. And when I went into this, when I got to India, I ran across this guy. We're talking too much. Okay, but I ran across this guy who, well, really, I got at the border. I had no money. I thought they were going to let me across the border. I had to walk across the demilitarized zone, and the customs was a tent on the edge of a battlefield zone or demilitarized zone. So But the guy was a Sikh guy with a big beard and long hair, and I had a big beard. I thought he was scary. He thought I looked great. So he says, "Oh, you're from Canada. Welcome. You can stay forever." He didn't ask me about money. He didn't ask me anything. I walk in. I'm going to India. Okay, so I'm walking in, and just as I'm walking away from the tent, these three guys show up in pin-sized groups on motorcycles. They're driving up to the border. They were up to no good, but they were just curious what's up. They up to the border. One of them gets off the motorcycle and comes up and offers me food. I hadn't eaten in 3 days. So I thought, well, this is a nice invitation to India. Anyways, they took me to a local area, and they were going to send me into this military zone where I would have got arrested or shot or something. And just as that's about to happen, some little kid on a bike comes and says, "Would you like to come with us?" And they had their motorcycles, but they picked up 2 people each on the back of a motorcycle. So there's 3 on a motorcycle, and they drove through these crazy trees back to their little village area. And this kid walks up and says, "We come with us." And the other guy that was on the motorcycle said, "Yes, yes, yes." He was scared to death, and I was more in shock. But then we followed this guy, and we walked through this little town. And as we walked through this little town, just a little Indian village, like walled city with little streets, and we're walking through this little market. We get through the main market area. We're going through the far side of the town, and just as we did, this other guy, Sikh guy, beard, turbans, walking along the street, walks along. We're walking one way, he's walking the other way. He walks past, doesn't say anything. He walks up at me, looks right in my eyes, says nothing. And then as we walk past him, he turns around, walks behind me, and we follow this kid a couple more blocks and go into his house and sit down in his house. And this other guy walks right into the house, nothing said, and sits down right in front of me, staring at me. Okay. So this was my introduction to India. This is all in the first hour or so of being in India, hour or 2. But this man had just spent 11 months in a cave just meditating and chanting, and he had just come out, so he was in an altered state, but we talked to me and we connected, and he pulled me out, and I went to his place to stay with him. So we would meditate and stay, and after a week or so, he explained the rooms, and he gave me the opportunity to go and spend some time alone, 11 days in this solitude room. Really, it was a cupboard in the back of somebody's house, back of somebody's store, but it was set up to be able to be where they could put food in, and you get some food, and you have a little latrine in there. So it was the first time I ever spent 11 days in like solitary confinement. But the idea was you're chanting and you're trying to unlearn the things you think you knew to get personally. But after 11 days, I felt I cleaned out my psyche a little bit. That something happened. I had to go further. So like he taught me something he knew, showed me, but then I wanted to go further. So he raised the money and sent me down to the main guru who was in Surat. It's still, that's probably a 14-hour, maybe a 20-hour train ride. So you go to Delhi and they take another train and go down into Surat. So that was, he sent me there, and I went down there, and then when I went, I met this Guru Mota Maharaj, and this by February,